Right, guys, I just want to talk there very quickly about your work that you had to do for me for today. So you were investigating the rate of a chemical reaction, and you yourself were choosing the types of variables you were going to investigate. So effectively, you were the person who got to choose your own variables. Now, remember when we were looking at variables, you were asked to choose your dependent variable, your independent variable, and your control variables. So you can only have one dependent variable. So people were getting back to me, and they had a few different ideas. The dependent variable, remember, is what we measure or what we observe. So for many of the experiments I got in so far, what people observed was how long it took for the tablet to dissolve, and that would be perfectly fine as a result. An independent variable is what you change. So some people might have chosen things like changing the volume of the liquid, in other words, changing the volume of the solvent, and see how that affects the result, or things like temperature. So there are many options that you may have chosen, but now what we're going to do is we're going to try and put a bit of order to the actual write-up itself. So what I've done here is I have laid out a kind of a method template for this experiment. So your method is going to vary depending on what tablet or kind of chemical reaction you chose to do at home. I gave you a few options, and if you struggled with it, with coming up with an idea, well, you still have the option of emailing me to let me know if this is okay or not. But really, the title and date for this experiment would be like, for example, if I was looking at the experiment I did myself, which involved the effect of stirring. So to investigate the effect of stirring a mixture on the rate of a chemical reaction. That would be the experiment title if I had done the one I was talking about. Whereas for this experiment here, a student is choosing to investigate the effect of temperature on the dissolving of a vitamin C tablet, and that is also perfectly fine. For each experiment write-up from each student, I expect the following: a title and date, a hypothesis. So what's your educated guess about what's going to happen? Well, you should have a hypothesis already because you've done your experiment. The dependent variable is, again, what you're measuring or observing. And for most of us who've done our experiment, what we're going to be looking at is time it takes for the tablet to dissolve, and that'll be your results. Remember, your dependent variable is basically your results. Your independent variable is what you're changing. So again, what I changed in my experiment was the rate of stirring. But for you guys, it depends really on what you chose. Now, there's a few different options, like, for example, temperature, and I'll be showing you another option in a second. The control variables, what did you keep the same in the experiment to make sure it was a fair experiment? So just like any other experiment, you should, I'm going to number these now. You're each going to have a title and date. You're going to have a hypothesis. You're going to have, and I'm going to call this one variables. You're going to have apparatus. You're going to have a method. So an apparatus, I'm going to ask you to write it up in such a way that you have written down, for example, a tablespoon is to be acting as a stirrer that you would have inside the lab. A cup is to be used as a beaker, etc. Okay, so just listing off all your different equipment. Your method is just like any method we have taken so far in science. You write it down as bullet points. So this should be a bullet point. And you write down step by step what you did to undertake the experiment. Now, you're going to have to write this out using the equipment you had at home in your kitchen or your home. So you just write out, like, for example, fill 50 milliliters of water into a measuring jug. And you know how we do this. We spell it out. We explain it like a recipe so that someone else could repeat your experiment and they could get the same results. That leads us on to the next part, number 6. You're going to have your results. And your results the table will very much depend on the type of experiment that you did. So, for example, if I was looking at the experiment I put up, well, I would be looking at the rate of stirring versus the time taken to dissolve. And underneath it, I would have no stirring and I would have stirring. And I would write down the time taken to dissolve. For this one, it's temperature, so cold water, lukewarm water, boiling water. And finally, then we have to do a graph. And we choose a suitable graph. If it's a bar graph or a line graph, you decide on that. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to say the final thing, conclusion. My results show that the following. And you look at